Um, Welcome everyone to this wonderful session led by Ty and John. I'm Jenny, and I'm just going to take everyone through the sort of the entry slides that we always start MyFest with. First of all, I want to welcome everyone here, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, or disability. All are welcome in this space. In MyFest, we make space for others. We critique ideas, not people. We assume positive intentions. We participate to the extent that makes you comfortable. And as we discussed, you can have camera on or off and do that yes or no if there's anything that you need. And we aim to be accessible. So please do describe any visuals that you're using and anything else that might enhance the session for others. These are only part of our community agreement. So if you're interested in contributing to them, you can use the link or the QR code that you can see on the screen right now in the left-hand corner. Or again, just message myself or Yasser and we can sort you out. A few more things. The closed captions are available. You can turn them on yourself. If you struggle at all, just ask. We ask permission if we plan to record as we did the start of this. And you're welcome to have your camera mic on or off. Breakout rooms will usually include a quiet room. And please do message myself or Yasser on Zoom privately if you need any support, technical, accessibility, emotional, or any other kind. In addition to that, we want to encourage you to join our Discord community server. We're about to be joined by somebody else. This is Kara. We really want to encourage you to join us there. If you don't have a Discord account, you go ahead and get the app and create one first. And then once you're set up, you can use that link to join. If you have any questions at all, you'll be able to get in contact with any of the MyFest crew and we can help you out. And then finally, we'll be populating this throughout, so you don't need to get it right now, but there is a session feedback link, and feedback is a joy and a really integral part of MyFest. So when you do have a moment, if you could please just pop your answers into the feedback. It's not very long, I promise, and you'll be able to help shape future sessions. If there are any questions, go ahead and ask them now. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll let John and Ty get on with it. Right, if you're all okay, I'll put myself on mute and we'll let John and Ty get started. Thank you, John. Ty.
Alrighty. Thanks for joining us. Excited to have you here. Ty, you said, okay, so I'm going to head and share screen, but I think Ty's going to take us through the first bit of this webinar, including a plan for how we'll go forward, so you guys have a sense of our choreography for today. So you should see a kind of intro slide that says sizing up AI's environmental footprint for yourself or for your students and yourself.
John, while you're talking, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm John Ippolito. I'm a new media professor at the University of Maine. I also direct a program in digital curation, and I'm really interested in the way AI frustrates and empowers creators.
I'm just putting the link to the slides into the chat here. So I apologize, it is not a bit.ly link. So I'm Ty. I am a cautious optimist about AI and the potential. And think that we need to have more conversations about the consequences and the harms that are involved, as well as the positives, and beyond cheating, because I'm tired of the cheating conversation, if I'm honest. All right, do we want to go to the next one? So I am in Canada. In Canada, we tend to start things with a land acknowledgement. So on half of the screen, there is a picture of a map of Canada, and it shows different regions of the country that are marked off. These are the numbered treaties. So we have a few different types of treaties in Canada. And I am on Treaty 6, which is in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And it is the traditional home of the Cree, Blackfoot, Siksika, and a few other groups that I'm not going to remember. But I think one of the things that's really important to me is actioning the land and my reconciliation, and not just doing a land acknowledgement and moving on. And so with that in mind, I think one of the things that was really interesting for me about AI and Indigenous perspectives was a speaker that I heard talked about how Western culture sees knowledge as transactional and something that I can get and it can be mine. Whereas many Indigenous cultures find knowledge as something that we have a relationship with. So it's never something that I would ever own. And so I think that's really interesting with the context of AI, which kind of has this like no owner on it. But also you kind of have this relationship where people are treating the AI tools as though they are people that they're talking to. So I just think it's a really fascinating exploration that trying to get engaged in any way I can.
And on the right-hand side, you see two folks who've influenced me in that same conversation about knowledge and the relationship to people. They're Wabanaki elders, Mi'kmaq and Kisitanomuk from the area that I live in Maine in the Northeast United States. And they're dressed in this photograph in traditional garb. All right.
Right. So in terms of an agenda, I'm pretty flexible. I was joking to John that my ADHD leans to some interesting presentations sometimes, where I will follow all the windows all at once. But we are going to talk a little bit about environmental impacts, and we are focusing on environmental. We will include a little bit of environmental justice as well. And then John's going to introduce you to an AI calculator that he's been developing, which is pretty cool. And then as a group, we'll work, or in small groups, we'll work on developing some personal use guidelines. And it's an activity that you can also do with your students or your faculty if you're a faculty development, or, in anywhere. You could do it with your family. All right, moving on.
So first a quiz. Which uses more energy and water? And those are the two things that I'm going to focus on in my kind of conversation today. Let's see if you have any thoughts about which you think is, sort of the most energy intensive. So creating a paragraph with AI text, something like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, charging a cell phone, let's say a smartphone like an iPhone, or Zooming for an hour with 10 people. We have 20 people, and we'll be here for an hour, so that'd be half the cost of today's webinar. So just in your head or in the chat, just think about like which of these do you think is going to be the biggest energy hog? Yes, from 0 to 100%. Thank you, Jenny, for the question, for that phone. Yeah, you let your phone die. Some of us are neurotic and keep our phone always charged, but let's suppose that you let it die and you charge it all the way up. All right, well, zooming for an hour, Doreen says, generating paragraph with AI, Yasser says. We've got a variety of answers here. Paragraph of AI, Zoom, no one said the cell phone. That's interesting. Okay, so without going further into it, the answer is somewhat annoyingly, it depends. And I hate when people give this answer, so I'm only doing it to prove a point, which is that in today's webinar, you'll learn some of the factors that make a difference in how much energy and water these systems use. So I've given 3 scenarios here, each with a different winner, if you will, of the sort of bad behavior standard here. And they depend on things like, where is the energy coming from? Is it coming from, for example, in the United States, a state like California has a fair amount of solar renewable as part of its energy mix, whereas a state like West Virginia has coal, right? Coal-fired electrical plants. And that makes a huge difference in terms of energy impact, about double. Are you writing a simple AI prompt, like what's the capital of, I don't know, Guyana? Or are you asking for something that requires reasoning, like thinking through a math problem? Are you writing a single prompt or multiple prompts? Many of us say like, oh, I wrote an email with ChatGPT. Well, did you write it with one prompt, or did you actually have it recraft it and modify it, 5 or 10 times? And then finally, are you writing in the winter or the summer? And if you're running electricity, especially with data-intensive programs like Zoom or AI, your data center is going to consume a lot more energy and water to cool itself if you're in a hot climate versus a cold climate. So as you can see, the difference in watt hours, and I'll explain what these measurements mean later, down here makes it, is quite substantial, so that zooming for an hour under the right conditions is 2,000 of these, and zooming under the wrong conditions is 12,000, and that makes a big difference. So I'll explain a little bit more how these different factors impact your use of AI, and you'll get a chance to experiment with them. Back to Ty.
All right. So this is a quote from the book Atlas of AI. I recommend it. It's a pretty good book. It's by Kate Crawford, and it's 2021 was when it was published. It's still fairly relevant, I would say, and goes through both the social and the environmental aspects. But the quote is, AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. Rather, artificial intelligence is both embodied and material, made from natural resources, fuel, human labor, infrastructures, logistics, histories, and classifications. And I think that this is really important. I so I teach sustainability, and one of the big things that kind of people started to realize at one point was that when we say we throw things away, people think, oh, we throw things away. It just goes away. It's not a problem anymore. And artificial intelligence and anything in the cloud, hence the background of our slides being clouds, kind of has that same connotation of this. It's just exists. There's no impact to it. And so I like Kate Crawford's work in terms of really conveying how much is actually embedded within these tools, not just on the environmental side, but also in terms of where they getting the data from, some really flawed research that is known to be flawed that has been used as the basis for a number of different things. So we'll go to the next slide. So I have this slide here. It says the title is Natural Resources, and I have resources in quotation marks. This is because I really like the work of Robin Wall Kimmerer, who talks about how if we framed things as something other than resources, if we framed them, say, as natural gifts, would we look at them differently? And I think that this is really important because one of the aspects of AI is that some of the impacts, like energy and water, are associated with the AI use. But of course, we never see that. We just use our tool on our computer and it just happens. But there are also these embodied aspects of it that aren't an impact of AI because of how the economy externalizes things, like mineral extraction. So the processing and transport of the minerals and the actual mining of the minerals is really problematic. It is sometimes in conflict regions. It often has dangerous working conditions, and who profits from these areas and who is displaced by them is also an important factor. And, there's some really interesting estimates. There was the podcast Freakonomics has an episode on, when are we going to run out of different things? And some of the metals that we need to use in our technology are things that, in the grand scheme of things, we don't actually have that much more that's left that's accessible. Energy to power the data centers. is inspiring both increased fossil fuel extraction and, of course, growing interest and investment in nuclear energy as well. And then water for cooling. One of the environmental justice aspects of this is that often industrial or commercial clients get priority water use. So regions that are already experiencing drought can end up experiencing greater water shortages because this is also where some of these data centers are being located. And so that is, again, problematic in terms of the environmental justice aspects, as well as the fact that we're using fresh water to cool things down, and that has implications for the ecosystem. And of course, all of this drives climate change, which can then further things like drought. So in terms of images, I have an image for each one. They're really more decorative than anything, but I have an open pit lithium mine where you can see the terraced edges going down to the lake. I have, because I'm in Alberta, so the middle image is of the tar sands or oil sands, depending on your political leaning. And those bright yellow spots that you can see in the image are sulfur piles, which is a byproduct of the tar sands mining process. And then we have these giant cement towers that are the cooling towers for data centers. And they're, set against a foreground of this wheat field with the bales. So in terms of our natural resources, there's a lot of impacts. There's a lot more that we could actually go into, but these are kind of the main ones. And I would say energy, people are pretty familiar with. Water, there's, the people I talk to are, lots of people are like, well, what's the deal with water? Why is that a factor? And mineral extraction is almost never in the conversation. So, raising these awareness for people is really important. And one of the things, so I taught a class on sustainability and AI in the winter, and I actually had students say that after learning about it, they started using AI less because they weren't aware of all of these bigger impacts. All right. You're muted, John.
So we do have a set of a space for questions at about half past the hour. But first, I'd like to introduce you to this calculator that I used to generate that first set of answers to the which kind of uses more, or I just loaded it about an hour ago to whatusesmore.com. So I think the domain is probably promulgated by now. I thought I'd show you how it works, and then I would also give you a chance to play with it with a specific sort of assignment in mind. So let me go back to here. Okay. So if you go to that website that was on the screen with the QR code, or again, I'll put the link in the chat
It is
for
in
everybody.
the chat.
It's in the chat already? Great.
I just
Okay,
put it,
so
yeah.
thank you. So you'll see something that looks a bit like this. This is a sort of form with 3 columns that allow you to modify your kind of assessment of 2 different tasks. And the goal is to see, which task basically comes out using more energy and water. I've got a sort of intro here, which I won't go into detail, except to say that this is all based on a lot of estimation. The industry is incredibly not transparent about their energy and water usage, as well as other environmental impacts. There are plenty that are not included in this calculation, including things like local noise, habitat degradation, changes to property values, and other environmental factors. Also, there's a lot of potential downsides of AI that we're not talking about today. I have an impact risk framework that you can click on from this first paragraph that'll describe those in more detail. But I also want you to know that I'm trying to be transparent about where I'm coming up with my sources. So I have everything in this calculator is run off of this Google sheet that's openly available. And this has got my measurements, where I found them, what my rationale is. It has conversions between units and also the sources that I am using primarily to find these things. Most of them are from 2025, but it is very hard to get this information. So I'm sure there's some information out there. I know there's information out there that the companies have that they don't want to reveal. So all of this is really estimates. And when you first go to the site, I have an annoying pop-up that says, please do not, quote these as gospel. They are all guesses based on incomplete and sometimes contradictory sources. So the three kind of intuitive units that I've tried to use here, and I do this very specifically because I have found that when you find conversations about AI and energy and environmental impact online, they're very polarized, and people will speak past each other because they're using different units. Oh, well, it's only this many, kcals. Oh, well, it's only this many grams of carbon. Oh, well, it's the same as driving a bus. Like, they'll use completely different sort of comparisons, and so it's really hard to do an apples to apples comparison. So I very deliberately chose something that is that are I hope pretty intuitive units, and I use them consistently. One is a watt hour. It's an incandescent light bulb running for a minute. That's it. So if you can imagine, like, hey, got a light bulb, the old school kind, and I'm running it for a minute, that's a watt hour. A liter, those of you who are in the US, you may not be quite as familiar with that. It's a quart, so that's the amount of water. A cc, or a cubic centimeter, that's about a raindrop. So if you can kind of wrap your head around those fairly intuitive metrics, then you can understand the results of the calculator. Then on the left-hand side, after this preamble, is an option for your first task that you want to compare. So I've got all kinds of goodies in here, from generating AI images to video, but also things like charging the smartphone, storing 5 gigabytes in a cloud. That's your free Google. If you use Gmail, that's your free Gmail allowance for a month. Watching a 1-hour Netflix movie, or like I said, Zooming with 10 people. And then there's a series of other options here that are basically different kinds of factors that may influence how that task is run. So when you see someone online say, oh, running an AI query is the same amount as this energy. Well, what are the conditions of that query? So some of the things are, as I mentioned before, the location. Is it solar powered, your local energy, or is it coal powered? What kind of prompt? Is simple? Is it a complex prompt where you're adding lots of paragraphs and tokens in there? Is it one of these reasoning or chain of thought prompts where you're asking of a sophisticated and very large language model to sort of think through a problem in advance and then do it step by step? Those can run from 1 to 5 to 15 times the amount of energy as such a straightforward, simple prompt. The number of prompts matters. Obviously, multi-step prompts, again, can be a 10 times the amount of the initial, one prompt. And then the season is, again, sort of just a marker for, like, are you running with a place where it's easy to cool data centers, or where it's very hard and uses a lot of electricity and water to do so? And I basically have it set up so you can choose 2 different tasks and try to see, kind of compare them. On the right-hand side are some units you can choose. But then when you basically, calculate the results at the bottom, you should get the values in watt hours and cubic centimeters of water. And then there's a little graph on the right. And the graph is a bar chart with there's colored based on the first task you chose and the second task. And you're essentially comparing that footprint. So what I'd love for you to do is, if everyone, and I'll be here to help if you get stuck or if it's not working for you. I want you to try to create conditions where you get inequality, where your 2 kind of bars of the graph end up being equal. Or for those who are visually impaired, you could just try to come up with similar watt hours as a result of both. And this is just a little game, but it's kind of trying to get you to see equivalences between some of these different metrics. So let's take like 5 minutes or something and see if we can see if you can get any of those equivalences. And I would love to see either screenshots or just some kind of comparisons. Like, hey, I found out that I don't know, running my cell phone was the same as doing 10 Google queries, or I found out that doing a Zoom call was the same as watching 4 hours of Netflix or something. I just very interested to see what people come up with. Maha, thank you, and Jenny, for your comments. I really appreciate it. I really make tools when I feel like I need them. So I hope that they're useful to other people too. Let's see if I can do this. Ooh, Robin posted something cool. And so you found oh, another okay, lots of comments in there. That's cool. Coding is cheap. That's been my experience. Yeah. Born by research. Watching Netflix is bad. Yeah. Now I will say that I assumed a big TV, right? If you're watching it on your cell phone, that's quite different. But it's one of those things where the more we dig into it, not that we should have whataboutism where it's okay to sort of just use something because something else is worse. You start to realize that non-AI uses or services or activities of your daily life in digital form can also use a lot of energy. We'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, Ty, in a later conversation. 3-second AI video, an hour of Netflix. Okay, yeah. So AI video, a big use of energy. And I was actually pretty surprised to see that recent estimates have kind of downgraded AI imagery, the cost of those generations, but AI video still, if you imagine, like you've got potentially 30 images per second of video. So that's a huge factor there. I love how Robin put in a the graph as well. 3-second video from AI, much more than an hour of Netflix. Yeah. Watching on your cell phone is not that bad. But you have to charge your phone. That is true, Maha. I didn't think about that. But remember, you're also sort of like, yeah, I guess there's you can kind of go down a rabbit hole of how many other things you're spending money on. Zoom with 10 people worse than Netflix. Yeah, that's been my calculations as well. Corporation responsible for an insane amount of carbon emissions. Robin, that is absolutely true. Is there an equal to corporations in terms of AI energy consumption, or is it truly spread among all users? So, I'm not a specialist in environmental science or the AI industry, but my take on this is that training models by far is a much more energy intensive kind of focus of corporations. However, the bulk increasingly of the energy comes from inference when we do prompting, and that's on us, right? So they're spending the energy to train these systems, and they're spending the energy to process our prompts, but essentially they're offering a service that we are triggering. And then there's also factors of that the data centers are used for a lot more than AI. AI still is about 15% of data center usage, and crypto and other kind of data crunching, such as all those algorithms that follow you on Facebook and so forth. That's still the lion's share of data center energy usage. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Ty came up with an equivalence. Nice. AI image, complex multi-step summer, the same as 3-second video. Yeah, both with coal powered. Wow. Okay. It's interesting to come up with those sort of equivalences when you can. Paragraph AI text, only a little more than storing 5 gigs in the cloud. Yeah. And that's assuming, I should say that storing of 5 gigabytes assumes no data mining, which is probably wrong. Like probably these companies like Google and so forth are looking through your photos and so forth. I have not done that calculation yet. I'm not even sure how to start. Yeah, I mentioned 5 gigabytes because that's the default like free tier on Google Gmail, personal Gmail. Usually people spend more time on AI. You need to compare an hour of AI use to an hour of Netflix. You know, that's a pretty good point, Maha. Eric Salvaggio, an artist who works with AI, has done a sort of personal ecology of AI. He refers to that he has put online that describes that. However, I've also seen the opposite argument. Bill Tomlinson of UC Irvine has done calculations showing that creating an image, for example, a logo, you know, as a graphic designer using Illustrator or Photoshop, uses more energy than AI if you just consider the fact that it's going to take that designer at least an hour to do it, whereas it'll take, you know, Dolly or Midjourney or, you know, Stable Diffusion a few seconds. Does that include all the embedded energy and other costs? You know, that's a potential critique of his argument, but it does sort of remind us that even the sort of, you know, pre-AI digital activities that we know and, you know, we think are more human also have a cost. Yeah, MYFest Zoom meetings are definitely more fun with Netflix. Those affected by our actions. Yeah, that is a really great point, David. I love that point. Another thumbs up for you. That some of these there is also a kind of calculus of like what is the potential benefit. I think this is something Ty is going to speak to later. Surprised how little Google search without AI. Yeah, basically at least 10 times less than a Google search with AI. Everybody know how to turn off those Google AI overviews that appear on your screen? Easiest way is just to put -AI in your search query. So, you know, Battle of Bunker Hill -AI or something like that. Yes. Oh, several putting that in there. If you swear, oh, I did not know that. That's cool. I want a demo of that one, Jenny. Does the energy include the energy consumption of running a router along with the item accessing the internet? Yes, Robin. So the things like not storing in the cloud, because that's assumed to sort of sit there, but Netflix, I've calculated the energy used on the server, the energy of transmitting the data to you, and the energy of your local TV. This calculator is amazing. Not going to get anything done for us today. Thank you, Robin. I love that people are finding ways to use this. How do we compare alternatives? For instance, what would cost if 10 people flew to a site versus participating in Zoom? So there's a lot of things I want to add in that I haven't yet. You can't compare exactly energy and water, but you can compare carbon. I did this calculation separate from the calculator for flight. And according to my calculation, you could, for the carbon impact of flying from one way from New York to LA, I could write 100 books with ChatGPT. 100 books. That's 30,000 pages. Now that's one shot. If I wanted to write decent books, I would take probably, you know, at least 10 prompts per book, and then maybe that's 10 books now. But the you know, some of the more industrial impacts of you know, climate impacts are just dwarf those of AI, at least currently. I have also heard that like people said that unless you're using public transportation, and I'm not counting planes as public transportation, you know, bus, subway, then a Zoom call is always more efficient in terms of energy. And then there's a paper that I quote in the sources that's about that. If the offices are nearby and you don't walk, well, then that's not so good. Please and thank you. Yes. So even Sam Altman says you don't have to use please and thank you because technically that does add a little bit more to the prompt. I think that's pretty minimal compared to the amount, you know, someone like me is very fussy about my prompts. Is your data always stored in a data center close to you? No, it could be far away. But, you know, these companies also want to save money, right? So they're more likely to send you to a local data center. And you want that, basically for speed as well. So you're more likely to be served by a data center near you. Surprise Google search without, yeah. Jenny posted an interesting screenshot. Show me all the fucking actors the falsity. I love that. That's great. Oh man. Okay. That's excellent. Did not know that. Yeah, so let's switch over to stop this exercise for now. Those were great questions. If anyone wants to sort of make any quick comments or questions now, and then we'll go on to our next section.
I have a question, John. I think one of the I love that calculator so much. I should start there. I think one of the conundrums around this is like, where do you stop counting? Where do you stop counting? If anyone's seen The Good Place, like there's a whole episode on, trying to live purely ethically, and the TLDR for that is it goes badly wrong. And I guess I'd like to hear from you where you sort of stopped your calculations, how you decided what would go in and out. Was it sort of in the moment energy used for that activity, or did you sort of take the thought process out a bit wider? Just a little bit around that, maybe.
It's a great question. The short version is that it's the all the energy use that I could get my hands around at the moment, but none of the embedded energy. For example, when you use a cell phone, as Ty mentioned, you're using, potentially conflict minerals, cadmium, molybdenum, and so forth. That takes energy to produce and embody into a manufactured item. There's the e-waste that then comes out at the other end. So I'm taking a kind of, momentary snapshot of that activity, and really only the energy and water impacts. And the water is essentially based on a conversion factor for data centers, for which there's been some decent research, and there again it varies very much based on what the climate of the data center is and so forth. There's a lot more you could include. So definitely a great question, and my emphasis is just like what's the immediate snapshot. Let's see. Highly recommend book. For the Wild, built by Becky Chambers. That sounds interesting.
It's just in reference to the robots liking Robin when they take over. So it's a science fiction novel about after the robot uprising.
Okay. So let me see if I can find. Yeah, here is a little meme I shared with my students recently in the chat related to that topic. If there's no other immediate questions, maybe we could go to the kind of next section, which was, if I go back to our slides.
So we're going to look at developing some personalized guidelines, or your AI use philosophy, however you want to frame it.
So I'm going to hand that over to you, Ty, to take us from there. Is that the right slide?
That is the right slide. So this is based on a presentation that I saw, and then I've included the link to a set of slides that she has online by Emily Simpson, who's at UBC, I believe. And she had these 3 categories of things to think about of, how do you make your decision of whether you're going to use AI for something or not? So obviously having some numbers is really helpful, to be able to, oh, okay, maybe I need to think about some of these things. But then what do you do with that information? And my plan is actually to have my students, when I teach the AI class again, I'm going to have them create their personalized guidelines at the start of the semester and then review them and edit them at the end of the semester to see how they change. I have an image on this slide. It was generated for a previous presentation that I did about AI for the faculty in my school, and it is basically a robot elephant. And so the purpose, what is the purpose of actually using the AI or the task that you are about to do? So is it necessary or fun? Creating a robot elephant was just kind of a fun addition for the slide deck. Could I create or do this on my own? Nope, I have no ability to create that image without the AI. Could I have found it? So does it already exist? Probably, and you'll see the images on the next slides are all ones that I went to Pixabay and found other people's images that they had already created. Does it replace something that has greater impact? So this was something that John and I were talking about yesterday of, like, oh, well, it uses less energy to generate a paragraph of text than it does to drive to the grocery store. Cool, but generating that paragraph of text isn't actually getting me my groceries. So it isn't replacing something that has greater impact. Whereas, the discussion of a Zoom call, if we all flew into the same location for MYFest, while it would be great to see you all in person, it's going to have a bigger impact than this Zoom call that we're on, and probably the Zoom calls for the whole summer. Is speed critical? So interestingly, Yasser made a comment about slowing down and not having fast answers all the time before we started today. And I think that this is a really key point as well, is speed vital to this? I have a student who's just requested a reference letter and it's due tomorrow. Admittedly, I might use some AI to help me write it. And is it the right tool for the task? So one of the things is, can you use smaller models? And I have a reference at the end that actually has some examples of like how the different types of ChatGPT consume different levels of energy, but there are smaller models versus more complex ones that you can potentially use. So that's our purpose. If we go to the next one, we have reusability. So is it one time or multi-use? Lots of times I start with things as a single time, and then if I get what I want, then I end up using it repeatedly. So my robot elephant, it's a cute little image. I've used it a few times. It was in a conference session where we were talking about playfulness with AI. And I asked an AI tool to generate me a rock ballad about the doctrine of discovery. It is spectacular. It is probably my favorite output from an AI tool. I would not have been able to do it otherwise. And I use it in multiple scenarios where I'm using it as an example of, how it did, how I critique things with students on how to use it. How are you saving or storing the generated content? So, are you saving it or are you going back and generating the same thing? And so I was just talking with a friend who a lot of the teachers in her school, she teaches in elementary school, and they're all using the AI to generate comments for the report cards. And I'm like, that's cool, but are they saving those comments so that they then just can pull those comments and use those comments? Or are they generating new comments each time? And so keeping that in mind of how can you save or store this material or this content? And how are you labeling it? So an interesting development, when I heard Emily speak in March, she had said that Creative Commons, you couldn't put a license onto AI stuff. The last update that I looked up yesterday was that it can be applied, but it only applies to the creative work that you contribute. How you define that, I'm not really sure, but So this is actually an image that was created using Dolly by Creative Commons, and it was on their article about this. So it is, you know, silhouettes, kind of stick figure silhouettes of people. I assume they're kind of creating things. That's what it looks like to me. So it looks like there's maybe, you know, a film crew and maybe some fashion happening, and then the Creative Commons logo in the center. So that's reusability. And then if we go to the last of the criteria, impact. So who benefits the most from this and who is bearing the costs of it? Is it going to solve a significant problem? Will the data I put in be used for training? And how does intellectual property rights? I do this discussion a lot with my students where, you know, you have no permission from your classmates to put their discussion post into an AI tool to generate your response. So we need to have those conversations. And I like these two that at the end kind of get to this more practical question of, would I be willing to use clean water to do this? And if I am, whose water am I actually using? And if I had to pay for each prompt, would I use it this much? And I think that these are really important questions to be asking. Yeah, who is bearing the costs, right? And lots of times, again, we don't know because it's like, oh, it just goes to the cloud, so there's no people involved. And I think that this is why we need to have more of these conversations about it. So we have, I'm just looking at where we are. We are going to do some breakout rooms. So John has just posted the link to a Google Doc into the chat. We're going to break you into groups of 2 to 3, and you're going to have, I would say, probably 7 minutes rather than 10, John, looking at the time, to just think about what some of your key questions or insights are, and things to consider are personal versus work. What won't you do? What will you do? And I like this as a reminder that your actions can also be not related to what you're actually doing with AI, but how you're talking about AI, and what conversations you're having. And you're going to put your comments into the Google Doc, and then we will come back and do a quick wrap up of that. So does somebody have the breakout rooms? We should have asked about this at the start, but.
Yes, I have them ready, and I will join whatever room is lacking people because some people left after I organized them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Jenny has posted the link for the feedback again in the chat. Something that I like thinking about with feedback now is that it's just being seen when you receive feedback. So I like that idea. And then John is working in the background. So I'm gonna maybe quickly share my screen here.
So Ty, I'm just looking over the questions and insights in there. I think there are few enough of them that we don't need to have, you know, them consolidated by AI or whatever. So we can use our own principles and not use it when it's not necessary. But there's a number of sort of, you know, questions that we could address in the last minutes if we want to.
So the only thing that I was going to add, and then you can do that, is one of the things that I have in, oh, I pressed the wrong button. Yep, give me a sec. There we go. So in my personal philosophy, I don't know, did it share my personal philosophy here? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I like to think about is, you know, that it's also not a like yes, no. Sometimes there is a if these considerations or under these circumstances, I think is really important. And there's just a few things at the end about having conversations. Limiting the output length. So saying, I want this concise, or please don't give me more than this amount of text is another way to reduce it. And then batching. So if you know you have a number of small prompts, you can do them all like, please respond to the following prompts, or respond to the following prompts, not please. And number each one in the output. So there's some ways to reduce it. And in our resources slide, there are a couple resources. So this 5 practical API techniques is really useful in terms of just identifying things. And this is the slideshow that I referenced. So then I will stop sharing and turn it to John.
So just at the end of time here, I just wanted to mention that there were some really good questions in the document if you want to look over them. One of the questions was whether energy is taken by the storage of previous AI queries, and that there was a sort of kind of persistence there. That happens at different points in the chain. I think a lot of people think that AI immediately learns from them as they're prompting, and that's not really true. It's more like your data is collected unless you explicitly ask it not to be. And then it's used to train the next generation of model. But you can turn off, for example, you can set a temporary chat in most of the chatbots. I do that regularly, like that's almost all of my chats because I don't want them training on my data. There are some questions about whether that's really happening, but that's another way you can reduce your footprint.
All right, so I think on that note, we're done. So thank you all for joining our conversation today. We hope that there's been some food for thought, and feel free to connect with either of us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much,
Good
Ty
luck
and
with the rest of
John.
MYFest.
If I could just
Always a
encourage
pleasure.
everyone. Oh, sorry,
quick
to
shout
fill out
out
the
to
feedback form.
Quick shout out to Rebecca Yeager, who came up with the replacement idea. What are you replacing it with? But thanks everybody for joining us. Good luck with the rest of MYFest.